Greetings to everyone, friends. On June 12, 2026, that is, in less than 2 weeks, the new Pact on Migration and Asylum will come into force in the European Union. And this is the biggest reform of the EU migration system in the last, just imagine, 20 years. And there is no good news here for Ukrainians living in the EU. Most Ukrainians living in Germany, Poland, the Czech Republic, France, and so on have never even heard about this pact or think that it doesn't concern them at all. The short answer, if you currently have temporary protection, then right now, of course, this doesn't concern you. But there are 3 situations when, first of all, it already concerns you now, and after March 2027, it will concern everyone without exception. In the case that the EU does not extend temporary protection. So today we will discuss what is changing, for whom it is changing, and this is important for all Ukrainians living in Europe to know. And I want to remind you, that's more than 5 million Ukrainians. Let's start with the first point. Why is this pact important at all? This is a joint European pact on migration and asylum. This is an agreed set of rules that are meant to unify the approaches of the 27 European Union countries to migration. The member countries have agreed to increase pressure on rejected asylum seekers to return and to simplify deportation procedures from the EU territory. It was also agreed to create so-called return hubs in third countries outside the EU. This is for those people whose country of origin is difficult to determine or who cannot be sent back or deported. Yes, to the country of origin for various reasons, because of war, because of danger to their own lives, and so on. But still, these people will be expelled from the territory of the EU and will be placed in third world countries and will live in some, enclaves. Before this, each EU country had its own rules, and as a result, people moved between countries looking for better conditions, so-called secondary movements. That's it. Poland, for example, refused such people, so the person went to the Czech Republic. If the Czech Republic refused, they went to Germany. And it was precisely the lack of a common approach that created tension at the Polish-Belarusian border. When Belarusian and Russian security services brought and continue to bring illegal migrants from African, Asian, and Middle Eastern countries and sent them to storm the Polish border. Then these people, agents, including Ukrainian ones, yes, who were hired by those same Belarusians and Russians, offered them easy money and were supposed to deliver them to Germany. Yes. And already on the territory of Germany, they applied for asylum, and that's why there were a lot of cases of these illegal migrants being caught, as well as the drivers. The migrants were sent back to Belarus, and the drivers were deported to their country of origin. If they were foreigners, if they were Polish, they were simply put in prison. Oh, and this very problem, that is, fragmentation and secondary movements between the countries of the European Union, is one of the main reasons for adopting the Pact. The Pact closes these loopholes, the systems are integrated, the database becomes shared, and the decision of one country is visible to other countries as well. And let's talk about the 5 main changes that await us after June 12. The first change is accelerated procedures at the borders. The new pact introduces mandatory accelerated border procedures for people from countries with a low refugee recognition rate. A decision will be made in 12 weeks instead of 6 months, or sometimes it even took years. For Ukrainians, this means that if someone applies for asylum after the end of temporary protection, the procedure will be much faster than before. This is good in some ways, but bad in others. Because a quick decision is good, yes, but on the other hand, if you get denied, it will happen faster. And you will be deported to your country of origin, that is to Ukraine. Change number 2 is a shared database and tracking. New systems such as ES and ETS, which we have already talked about with you 150 times, will ensure that only people with valid status will be able to travel and return. The systems track entries and exits through fingerprints and facial scans instead of passport stamps. And there have also been cases when a person could enter through one country, leave through another, and depending on where and what happens, at which border, certain decisions are made. Now, in this way, let's say hiding from one country or another simply won't work anymore. What does this mean? If your status has expired in one country, it is visible in all EU countries. You can no longer move and start from scratch. The third change is those same return hubs in third countries. It has been agreed to create return hubs in third countries outside the EU for those who have been denied protection. This means that a rejected asylum seeker may not be sent directly home, but first to a transit center in a third country. This mechanism is still in development, but it fundamentally changes the system. Because in fact, it will allow the deportation from EU territory even of those people who were previously granted protection. Because, for example, they can't return home since there's a war in their country, so now they will be sent to a country where there is no war, but it won't be in the territory of the European Union. And this is actually one of the most revolutionary mechanisms that this pact brings. Because even if, for example, temporary protection ends and Ukrainians start applying for real asylum en masse, they can be refused and sent to these same hubs. Purely in theory. The fourth change is a solidarity mechanism between countries. EU countries are now required either to accept displaced persons from overloaded countries or to make a financial contribution. This lowers incentives for secondary movements by equalizing conditions between countries. This is also a very interesting point because, for example, Poland, from the very beginning said that they reject this migration pact. They are not going to accept any refugees, for example, from Germany or France. And they referred to the fact that millions of Ukrainians already live in Poland. And it was thanks to Ukrainians, specifically with the help of Ukrainians living in Poland, that they managed to challenge the decision about this quota system. And now Poland is not obligated to accept refugees from Africa, Asia, or the Middle East, because many Ukrainians live in Poland. So, by the way, that's another benefit from Ukrainians living in Poland for Poland itself. But of course, the anti-Ukrainian Confederation and all anti-Ukrainian forces will never ever mention this. And the fifth change is simplified deportations. 9 countries, including Poland and the Czech Republic, have called for simplifying the procedures for deporting foreign criminals. The new rules reduce the opportunities for appeals and delaying the process. If we are talking about Ukrainians in Poland, we know that Ukrainians in Poland are deported like this for various types of violations. It might not even be a criminal offense, it could even be administrative violations. There are already appropriate mechanisms, that is, they simply officially make a decision that this person, their activities threaten public order in Poland, and you can fit anything into that. And the person is immediately taken to the Polish-Ukrainian border and handed over to the Ukrainian border guards. Usually these are men of conscription age. Next, moving on. What does this mean for Ukrainians in general right now? For all Ukrainians, it doesn't matter where you live. In Poland, in the Czech Republic, in Germany, in the Netherlands, in France, Croatia, Italy, it makes no difference. That's it. Because if temporary protection, for example, will last until March 2027, the EU is still allocating funds to support temporary protection separately from the general pact, right? So, those who are under temporary protection, that's a separate mechanism. And the new pact does not directly cancel or change your temporary protection. Right? But there are 3 situations when the pact concerns you right now. Option A is when you have lost temporary protection and are living, for example, without status. And as it turns out, there are a lot of people like that as well. People don't even know because they don't check their status. And it's very easy to lose it, including in Poland. Because we know that there are even technical errors when you lose your status, even if you haven't left Poland for more than 30 days. These situations are nothing new. They started back in 2022 and continue to this day. So if for any reason in any European Union country your temporary protection is not extended or is cancelled, then you fall under the general system, which has now become stricter, and it will be much easier to deport you. Situation B, you are moving between EU countries. The shared database means that your status in Poland is visible in the Czech Republic and vice versa. So, if you try to get new temporary protection in another country after already having it somewhere in the EU, this will lead to fragmentation and secondary movements, which the Pact is now trying to stop. So, theoretically, after June 12, 2026, according to this pact, it may simply be impossible to change your temporary protection status from one country to another. If you want, I can look into this topic more broadly, in more detail, specifically the change of temporary protection after June 12, and I will also make a separate episode about this. If you want this, write in the comments so I can somehow respond to it. Dale. Next, third, this is when you apply for asylum in parallel with temporary protection. The new accelerated procedures mean faster decisions, but also less time to prepare your case. And now this may also be possible because many people in different EU countries have, I'm not talking about Poland, they will be applying for asylum, yes, for submitting documents for asylum. For now, they even have temporary protection to secure themselves after March 4, 2027. Next, when does the pact become fully relevant, like for all Ukrainians living in the EU? After the temporary protection ends in March 2027 for those who haven't received another status, and if, of course, the temporary protection is not extended. That's it. What exactly is changing? First, accelerated review procedures, meaning if you apply for asylum after the temporary protection ends, the decision will be made within 12 weeks, not in a year or a couple of years. Next, second, tracking through the EU system. Your entries and exits are recorded automatically if you are without status and stay in the EU. The system also records this, and you much faster. They will start looking for you faster than it was before this system was implemented. And third, these are expedited deportations for those who have been denied. Fewer opportunities to delay the process through appeals. And one more important detail, friends. The directive on long-term residence currently excludes recipients of temporary protection from its scope to make the transition to long-term status possible for Ukrainians. The European Commission should review this. Exclusion. That's how it is. So even 5 years under temporary protection today does not automatically grant the right to long-term status. This needs to be resolved separately. And some countries are already moving in this direction. And by the way, regarding the fact that temporary protection is not counted, for example, towards the time required to obtain citizenship or residency in the European Union, there is a very interesting article about obtaining German passports. Ukrainians under temporary protection. This is a very interesting topic because it turns out that in Germany there are certain states where, as it turns out, they are now considering the possibility of issuing passports to Ukrainians who have lived for 5 or more years under temporary protection in Germany. Just imagine, I'm already preparing this topic. If you're interested, write in the comments. The more comments there are, the sooner I'll release this topic. Next, a practical checklist of what you need to do right now. First, check whether your temporary protection counts toward the requirements for permanent residency. This depends on each individual country. In some countries, yes. In others, no. The Netherlands has already announced a 3-year permit after temporary protection. That's it. It will already count toward that period. Poland is the same. The Karta Kuker. You can already start submitting documents for it. You can also use it. Next, second, don't wait until March 2027 to apply for asylum if you have grounds for it. Because asylum systems will be overloaded after temporary protection ends. When millions of people submit their documents at the same time, those who apply earlier will have an advantage because they will get a decision faster. Third, do not move between European Union countries without a clear understanding of your status in the new country. That's it. And in fact, remember that after June 12th, 2026, which is less than 2 weeks away, there may be a situation where you won't be able to change your temporary protection status from one country to another. Although some countries are already prohibiting it, let's be honest, there are a number of EU countries that still allow you to change your status without any problems. That's it. And fourth, keep an eye on the decisions of the specific country you live in. And by the way, write in the comments which country you're watching my videos from. Each EU country implements the pact in its own way within the framework of common minimum standards. Poland, Czechia, and Germany will announce their details only after the official position of the European Commission. So friends, let's remember the date June 12, 2026. If you still have temporary protection now, you are protected. If you don't have it, then you are not protected. So look for options. Either obtain temporary protection or get another legal status. At the very least, start working on it. That's it. After March 27, 2027, if you don't have another status, this strict system will start working against you. That's it. That's the situation we have right now. Maybe it's neutral, maybe it's negative. Decide for yourself, based on your specific situation. What do you think about this? Write in the comments. I'd be very interested to read your thoughts. Also, let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover. I'll be happy to do it. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss updates about new videos. Thank you all. See you next time.